Hi, Ryder. We're going to look at your rhythm and repetition, as well as the Notan postings. Give you a little observational feedback here. So here's the repetition and rhythm. Looks like all of your exposures look pretty good, and composition-wise, these look pretty sound, just in terms of the arrangement of everything on in the picture plane. Looks like you're activating all of the spaces. In other words, it appears that we're taking into consideration all of the picture plane, looking at the entire frame as we're organizing things. As part of what this repetition rhythm exercise is about, is to sort of take note of the whole space and incorporate this rhythm into it, finding the rhythm and being able to position ourselves in order to make it work within the composition. So then the other part is identifying the rhythm type and how to use it. First is just the simple part is, can you identify what is an alternating rhythm and what is a progressive rhythm? These are design principles that as a creative professional, you'll just need to know out of hand what those are. This is what you're presenting here. On these trees. Yes, on these trees here, I would say this is a alternating rhythm. Not say this is an alternating rhythm. Even though they're not exactly the same, what we have is the two qualifications of an alternating rhythm. First, a motif, meaning an object that is of similar kind. It can be of similar shape, similar color, similar chair, or in this case, tree. These trees are the symbol of tree. So now repeating, and yes, they are repeating. And then so now we know there's two qualifications for a rhythm to start to happen. Then we just basically see how is that rhythm happening? Is it happening in an even repeating space, or is that repeating element changing over time, over one to the next to the next? And in this case, the way you have presented it, this space and this space, they're relatively even. They don't change enough for our eye to perceive them as they're changing, right? So they're being perceived as the same. Those are the same differences between the space between this tree and this tree and this tree. They all are equal. So that creates an alternating rhythm. If there was another tree right here, we would logically think that it would need to be the same distance, and then same thing over here. So this is an alternating rhythm. I think you identified it as progressive rhythm, which that wouldn't be correct, because this is not progressing in a direction. This is going to be more like an undulating rhythm than really a progressive rhythm. Undulating rhythm is or this could even be more of a dissonant rhythm. The difference between the undulating rhythm, progressive rhythm, dissonant rhythm, which we didn't study, really has to do again with those qualifiers. Rhythm, which this is closer to than progressive. Undulating rhythm has a rhythm, it has a repetition, but the motif is difficult to identify. And so it's something happening, a repeating thing that's happening, but it's not a motif. The object is difficult to identify. In this case, it's a repeating thing, but the object is easy to identify, right? You can identify. We go to the next one. Okay, so what if it's a object easy to identify like this, but the repetition is unorganized, or the repetition, it's repeating, but the repetition is not predictable. So on the one hand, with undulating, it's a predictable object, but it's a unpredictable object. You don't know what or the object is predictable. We can tell what the object is, but its repeating is not predictable. So looking at this is an object, but the repeating is very scattered and very irregular. So this would be a dissonant rhythm. There is a bit of aggression going on because it's leading away from us, but the emphasis of this is more on the what you've captured is something we're not even really studying, but it's good to know, the dissonant rhythm. A dissonant rhythm is a motif that is identifiable. You can tell there's a repeating object or a repeating element, but the repetition is non-rhythmic. You can't tell where the next one logically would be. Hopefully that helps. This is a pure, straightforward C in that kind of setup. Fence posts are pretty much the for students doing this project. I see a lot of fence posts kind of things. So that's the go-to when you're looking for that kind of a rhythm. Is go for some fence posts. This is a better sort of solution only because you're getting this sort of more subtle variation of the progression. So you've got the whatever these are, ducks, I guess. And then you got the next one, and then the next one back farther away, and then the next one, and they're farther away. So these are setting up that progression that I was mentioning. The elements, these repeating motifs, that's repeating. This motif, that's repeating. It's somewhat regular. It's not perfectly regular, but it's regular enough. This is somewhat regular. It's not perfect, but it is regular enough. So this is definitely, yes, progressive. I'm saying these things because it is important that you can identify this as progressive rhythm. It seems like maybe you have them switched around or something, or at least you're maybe stabbing in the dark at what they are, because here you've called this alternating and this one progressing. And it's maybe the other way around. I think you might have them flip-flopped. Progressive rhythm isn't this. This is alternating rhythm. So I think maybe you just have them confused one to the other. Undulating rhythm, again, is a motif that is not identifiable. So this is definitely a motif. Is unpredictable. So that's going to be a dissonant rhythm. We didn't do that one, but that's a dissonant rhythm. This, on the other hand, is a repetition that is somewhat patterned. We can see how it's like there's a wave here and a wave here and a wave here, and it kind of repeats. But the motif is like, what's the motif? Is it like splash? It's as you can see, the motif is hard happening. This is undulating. Undulating is when you have a rhythm, but it's a motif, a repeating object or element is hard to really pin down or identify. So I think the compositions themselves are really working well. I just think you have maybe a flip-flop on in terms of being able to identify the various types of rhythms here. So now we're into the by the way, this is a really good undulating rhythm. This is a good example of the undulating rhythm. It's hard to say what the motif actually is. The motif is more like, waves, shadows, and things like this. Okay, you're calling this notan and shadow. So I'm going to presume that notan, you're talking about the spaces in between part, and then the shadows, you're talking about using as shadows within the composition. So cast shadows, it's interesting because it's going in two directions, because some students are really struggling with working with the cast shadows, and others are struggling with working with the spaces in between. A few students are doing well on both, and a few students are struggling with just the idea, like, well, I'm taking pictures of looking pretty good for what I had seen initially, because you are incorporating them into the composition, not just making photos of them. And that's really the idea. Something like this is a really effective solution, not because it's an awesome shadow, which it is a pretty awesome shadow that you captured here, but because it's incorporated into a composition. It's not just a picture of a shadow. You're using the element to communicate something, to break up the space, using it as a design element, and that's what we want to do. So that's perfect. What we want you to do with the shadows here. This one's a little less effective, only because there's less going on. It's more a little bit less carefully composed, I guess. There's some debris up here that's not really helping. The little puppy here is not really framed very well in terms of in the shot. It's hard to make photographs of moving objects like this. But yeah, this one is much less considered, which would make sense because it's hard to make photographs. I mean, this one is really powerful because of the time of day. You're getting this real kind of energy that's happening, that kind of stuff. This one's really beautiful because of the kind of delicacy of the shadows and the way that it's interacting with the landscape and all of that kind of stuff. When we get to the notan, however, this is where it seems like you're trying to find out how to do it. And this kind of image is usually what we start out with. Is when we hear negative the spaces in between the things that are not the subject. This is usually what ends up being the first thing that comes to our mind is, thing in a big blank space. And really, I mean, if as you're looking at this and I'm talking about this, the purpose of all of this space, it's hard to really justify. It's hard to say why all this space, right? Leaving it there for some text later on or type or something like that. It's hard to say what we really, needed this space for, right? So that and this it's not quite, it's not what we're going for. We kind of jokingly call this acreage, because it's just so much passive negative space that even something like this just gets lost in the mix. So this is not what we're looking for when we're going for this balance of negative space or activating the space. This is getting much closer to what we're going for. I say much closer because there's always ways to improve, but this right up in there, all of the twigs, all of the limbs, they're breaking all four of the edges of the picture, right? You've got stuff going down the bottom, on the sides, on the top. So what happens when you do that is you've got all of these shapes that are then created. In my overview talk, I talked about this a lot. I gave the example of that and showed you a difference between the two. And so you're doing exactly that. The thing that I think could be improved here would be the quality of light. It's real cast, kind of gray here. We had more of a delicate quality of light. Some of the lighting that was used when you did the shadow ones would have been quite nice and maybe a little bit closer. So we're identifying some of these shapes a little bit more clearly. But here it's a negative space is playing a vital role in the overall composition. It feels much more like a photograph of ducks. I guess these are ducks, or I'm not sure what they are. Geese. Maybe those are geese. Anyway, it's a photograph of birds. And so what we were going for is the exploration of this balance between positive and negative space. So none of these projects are meant to make you masters of anything. They're meant to introduce you to concepts, and they're meant to introduce you to ideas to explore. And that's why when I do these reviews, I'm talking much more about what I'm observing and connecting them directly to the objectives and intentions of the project. Even though your photographs are by and large, I'm showing you where we want to be moving in terms of intention on the project, so that you can aim all of that ability, your ability to kind of look and to see these things. We want you to be able to target it into a very specific direction when you call upon it. So that's why we're kind of looking at your photographs this way. So if you have questions, we're in the studio. So we'll see you later. Bye now.